Mom and Dad's always been plugged into their business, very committed. Also plugged into their church, very committed. The history of Dad's company is dignity in life, and he lives it.
They're just wonderful on every level. And what you see is what you get.
They lived what they preached, and they lived by prayer, and they ran their family that way.
So everything we do in this company points back to a phrase inside of our integrity value. And the phrase says, we will act in such a way that will make God smile at our efforts. And so that's probably why we're so committed to treating everyone as the most important person in our lives, because we know that that's what's expected of us in how we deal with the seniors that we serve, as well as one another as team members.
Probably the thing I love the most about Jack and Eldora is they're just genuine, they're family.
They're so authentic in who they are and what they believe. It's always been about their faith, I think, first and foremost. They never waver from that. You feed off that.
The way they care about others and love others, it makes you want to do the same. Just their warmth and positivity, it makes you more of that type of person as well.
For me, it's clear. I would not be the leader I am. I would not be in this place had it not been for their influence over my life. Probably two key phrases for me. One would be generosity. But I also think there's a notion of being pioneers.
So we've been partners with them for probably over 20, 30 years, and they've always treated their team members like family.
I think the reason that I've stayed so many years is because them treating people as you would want to be treated.
They help you to recognize what's important in your life with your family and loved ones. And
you're just so generous. They're family.
The thing that stands out about Jack and Eldora is you always do it the right way. You treat people fairly, you do what you say you'll do, and that's what he's taught.
They gave me a chance. I started for them when I was 23 years old out of college, and by the time I was 24, turning 25, they gave me a building to run. I can't think of any greater gift than somebody looking at you and saying, I trust you, and I think that you're capable to do this.
They both thrive to see others be successful, so they invested in people, and obviously they had to do that to build a company of this size.
Dad was a small-time farmer, rancher, probably rancher. Had some cows, and then he worked out at a blacksmith shop. We lived about 5 miles from Bassett. That's where I began to remember some things. I think I was an ambitious kid.
I was born in the Sandhills, 40 miles south on the Snake River of Merriman, Nebraska. I had a wonderful childhood. One of my first memories is my dad throwing me up in the air and catching me and hugging me and saying, just fits. Work at home was always a family affair. If we canned corn, the guys picked it and peeled it, and we in the house would do our cutoff and canning. It was canned on an old stove in a big old boiler. We always all worked together. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons why, to this day, we're a close family. We were in opposing schools, but we didn't meet, and I was out of school when we met. He had 1 year left when he chased me.
She wasn't hard to catch them.
We both were involved with church. He was a youth leader in his church, and I was a youth leader in our church. Up in that country, the churches don't have baptismals, so they do a creek baptism in the summertime, and all the churches get together, and all the people that want to be baptized get baptized in the creek. Very cold creek, so the first time we ever talked to each other, we were both soaking wet. Dripping wet, cold. He asked me for a date, and so we went to church, and that was our first date. It was very simple. It was just a church wedding, and
we chose to go on a honeymoon and didn't take professional pictures.
That's right, we didn't have professional pictures. When I graduated from high school, the attorneys in town called the office practice teacher and said, who's the student you would recommend for, they had position open as a secretary, and they hired me, so I worked there the 3 years we dated. And it became very valuable in my life to have those 3 years in an attorney's office. When we got married, I worked at the Chamber of Commerce office in Bassett, and the banker came to me and said, "We have an opening at the bank. Are you interested?" I always say it was the Lord's training grounds because it was what he knew I needed down the road.
I was a blacksmith. It was a real old-time blacksmith, and we made machinery, we repaired machinery. After I'm not sure, Eldora, I don't remember quite exactly what followed the blacksmith, because I went to Ford Motor Company.
No, you went to Blake's.
Was that first?
Yes, Ford Motor Company was after you come home from the Army.
Oh, okay. I was in a period of time when you were drafted.
Kind of towards the end of the Korean War.
It was done. It was 1956. I did heavy equipment repair.
He didn't get his discharge until we had 3 children. We had bought a trailer house, and it was parked at his parents' place out of Bassett, and so I lived there.
It wasn't much money, I'll tell you that.
Can live pretty economically. Plus, Jack, we had saved some stuff. I bought a bond or two and some bonds while I was working at the bank, and then we bought a house, and the house payments were $35 a month.
And then I worked for Ted Blake, and then I worked for Ford Motor Company. About starved doing that.
We sure didn't have any money. It doesn't hurt you to go without. I think it's good for the character. Makes you a more understanding of other people. It doesn't hurt kids not to have everything. Our kids, each one had their own personality, what they did when they were little. While he had these jobs, I was busy with 3 kids, and I did books for a lot of people.
But then at the sale barn, I was there a couple of years as a yard manager. So the cattle coming and going, I kept that flowing. From there, I went to a feed mill fertilizer plant. But all those items I did had a little piece of what I learned that I draw on even today. If any one thing in my life happened that changed the direction altogether, when Bernie Corral said to me, "Jack, why don't you become a nursing home administrator?" Back then, you don't think about what the future is. You got a new job, you got a new facility to run, and I didn't have any training on people management or any of those kind of things, and the good Lord was a great help to me. At the time it was built, it was probably one of the best ones in the state of Nebraska. I stayed at Valentine for about 2 years, and then the original Bethesda company that hired me said they needed a director of operations. Then I worked for Bethesda from that period on till I bought Fairbury, and I stayed with Bethesda 1 year after I bought Fairbury, 1.5 years. When we moved to Valentine, there was a good little airport there, and Eldora and I talked about it, and I always wanted to learn to fly. So I flew while I worked for Bethesda, and then after a little while, after I got on my own, I was able to pick up Bonanza, and I've got about 4,000 hours altogether. I'd been running nursing homes for Bethesda, so I knew numbers, I knew the procedures, and I knew a lot of things. But I never knew there would ever be a chance for me to own my own. That was not part of my thinking. Bethesda owned about a dozen homes. They sold 3 nursing homes, Bridgeport, Geneva, Fairbury. Sold them to Wayne Field in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so I got to know Wayne because I was part of that transaction. And then while I was with Bethesda, I'd moved my friend Chet Fry from Valentine to Geneva. So he was administrator. He calls me one day and says, "Jack, Wayne is coming down to see me, and he's going to sell his nursing homes. And I have an opportunity to buy the one here in Geneva. Would you come down and talk with Wayne and I while we discuss the deal?" And I said to Chet, I said, "Well, if Wayne's going to sell you Geneva, I wonder if there's a possibility he would sell me the one in Fairbury." So I flew to Geneva and sat with Chet and Wayne, talked about a deal for Chet to buy it. And then when we were done, Wayne says, well, Chet tells me you'd like to talk to me about Fairbury. He said, let's go over and look at it. So he drove to Fairbury and I flew to Fairbury, and he met me at the airport and we went in and toured the facility. And he said, I want $888,000. That was in 1974. And we talked a little bit. I said, Wayne, that's more money than I know. I said, I can't put together enough money to buy this. And he said, well, you don't need to. I'll fix it so you can. So that was the first time the opportunity really unfolded. The problem was he wanted $28,000 down, and we didn't have $28,000. Once I go home, I don't talk business very much. But that night when I went to bed, I said to Eldora, I said, I bought a nursing home today. She said, you what? That's when it started. How do I raise $28,000? So I got in the airplane and flew to Fairbury. And so I said to Eldora, I'm going to go to Fairbury and I'm going to talk to this other banker and see what we can do. I already talked to one of them and they turned me down.
He left and I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at our kitchen table and laid my head on the table. And it's not really my common practice to bargain with God, but I was pretty desperate. And so I said, Lord, if this is your will, then I want the bank to lend Jack that full $28,000 and not just $5,000. And when he came home that night, he said, you're not going to believe what happened. And he said, well, that banker said if he was going to lend me money, he would rather lend me the $28,000 than just the $5,000. Almost the exact words that I had prayed. That was such a blessing to me through the years. If there was enough money to meet payroll, I say, God, if it was your will in 1974, it's still your will today.
And it was just touch and go. And I've never missed a payment. Never been late. With God's help, we made it work. I'm fairly much a positive thinker, and I just figured I can win this one.
Really, we worked together, but yet we worked very separately. We kind of had an agreement that he stayed out of my department and I stayed out of his, except for me to give him what he needed from my department. I would get the books done and I would do them clear through and do a cost report every month that gave him per patient day costs and all those things. And I loved it. You know, it was my thing. I also like the making it look pretty. I like that part of it. And so in our first nursing homes, there was lots of garage sale pictures and pretty things because, you know, you could buy them cheap and we didn't have much money and I loved to do it. And so I did that because we had our offices at home. I'd go up and get supper, and then after supper sometimes if I had work to do, I'd go back down and work. My kids always, if they came in from a date, they always knew where to find Mom.
There was a nursing home in St. Edward, Nebraska, that Pauline Wallach owned. She had it up for sale, so the word was out that she was going to sell it. And so I picked up the phone and gave Pauline a call and asked her if she was going to still consider selling her nursing home. She said, yes, where you been? So I got in the airplane and I went to St. Ed. So that was number 2. I kiddingly used the slang, I'm a little bit of a gambler.
A little bit?
I cannot remember a day when quality care, taking care of people and doing it right, wasn't there. I wanted people to be taken care of well. I wanted them to look well. I wanted them to have the right nutrition and all of that. I had this little cluster of nursing homes. And so I decided to have a meeting with the administrators to get together. And so then I was some serious moments with myself. Because I would say, well, what can I tell the administrators of how I want these nursing homes to operate? Because I was a maintenance man, operations, I was the only guy. And so I thought about it at great length and had my yellow pad out. And that's when we coined dignity in life and mission, vision, and values. And so I coined our Dignity in Life logo. And then I thought, now what am I going to do with that? I've never read any books. I don't read books. I don't follow somebody else's diagram. I just thought I'm going to do it my way. When we had 6 or 7 nursing homes, I said, we need a management company. I need to isolate. I worked with Steve McGill and put the corporation together. No name really loomed out as to what I was going to call this corporation. So I said, well, let's just use our name. So we'll call it Vetter Health Service. And a little bit flippant, but it's what we did call it.
Our church life stayed pretty solid. We were long involved with missionaries before all this happened. Our involvement with missions was already solid. Wouldn't you say that? It was solid from the time we were young.
Charles Turner, the guy who worked for Bethesda, had built a house on the Millard Airport Strip, and he flew, so it had a hangar in it. I get a call from Bethesda's attorney, Steve McGill, and he said, Jack, Charles Turner's got to sell his house. You need to buy it. So we bought it. That worked out well for us because I flew, so I had a bonanza. Then we took the bottom level of the house and turned it into offices. I was pleased with what we were doing. I enjoyed what we were doing. You know, I like the growth and it's fun. I like deals, especially if they could turn out okay. We had some that didn't.
Because we bought so many of the homes from an owner that had grew it from the time they started, it was kind of like their baby, and we inherited some places with pretty good care.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we really were pretty fortunate in that we didn't have to go in and correct a lot of things, right?
Right. You know, the desire for people being treated correctly had just always been there. And I think it's proven itself in the fact that people trusted me. They knew if they sold me their facility that it might even be better than when they owned it because of our standard we set for quality. Always wanted to build new because I thought I could do them better, and we did. We did things nobody else ever done. We've expanded our operation into population centers, but I never wanted to sell the company, never. And so with Glenn's help and idea and our accountant and our attorneys, Better Senior Living will be there. Quality life, quality care, beautiful buildings, taken care of well, dignity in life. We've established that pattern.
We're often approached by providers, looking at getting out of the industry or the business, and they always seem to go to Jack first because of his true authenticity, I think, the way he truly treats everybody as the most important person in their life.
You know, any good business comes down to the quality of the people. It always comes down to the people. And Jack and Eldora kind of set the bar for everyone here to be of the highest caliber.
The Vetters really took it from an approach of, we're going to lead with quality first, and everything else will fall in line.
When I hear the name Jack Vetter, what comes to mind is integrity, passion, and humbleness. He's been so successful, yet he's done it in a very humble servant leadership way.
I learn from him constantly. He's just a wealth of knowledge.
They truly care about people.
My allegiance is to Jack and Eldora.
My coming back, mine being a comebacker at Vetter has really been led, and it's just been such an impactful time. I love working around people that hold up what's good in this world.
If there was a need in the community, they were there to help.
My parents are great examples, and I want to be like them.
To me, they were perfect parents. Mom and Dad were always there.
Growing up as a little boy, I always had missionaries in our home, and that was a great thing, a good thing.
I met Jack and Eldora when they were working in Tanzania. They were doing different missions programs and projects. It really did show me a path, I think, to provide assistance that had a lot more dignity. It was a way of equipping locals to solve their critical issues. really, Jack kind of opened my eyes to how business could be a real critical part to development.
The support of Jack has shaped me into a more confident administrator.
He's the guy, really, who gave me the freedom to solidify what I believe about leadership, about culture, and then put it in place in a practical kind of way.
I lay it all back to honesty and integrity and doing what you say you'll do. It's a miracle. The whole life.
I always can say, when I look back on my life, I can see how God used every experience to where I am today at 70. And if you follow your path, so it's all of those skills he learned, in those other jobs, doesn't seem to prepare you to be a nursing home owner.
I tried to do my best and do what I thought God wanted me to do, to be pleased with my life, to smile on my efforts.